It is time for another episode of The Break. I'm Father Roderick, your host. I'm a priest, I'm a geek, and I love to talk with you about everything I'm passionate about, from movies and TV shows to technology to video games, cooking, books, and so much more. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Now streaming live every week on Monday evening, Monday evening European time. I stream this live. If you ever want to join the rest of the community in watching me record this show, it's a little bit of a behind the scenes hour. Then feel free to chime in to join me via YouTube, Facebook, or Twitch at 6 p.m. Central European time. That's noon Eastern time, 9 Pacific time. So what are we going to talk about? Lots of stuff. Of course, I've watched some new TV shows, some shows that are new to me, but may be very old already, but that does not keep me from enjoying them. So we're going to talk a little bit about Rome on HBO, Pokemon Concierge, The Creator by Garrett Edwards, and Vinland Saga. Then in my book review, I want to talk about a book that I read about cooking by someone who may be right now my favorite television cook. And in the premium section of the show that is available to all my patrons, I'll talk a bit about technology, what's happening right now on TikTok. There are some unexpected changes here, and it's really requires me to adapt my own strategy as well. So I'm going to talk a bit about that. We're going to talk about Hogwarts Legacy. There's some interesting news there, and how Meta is responding to the Apple Vision Pro. Also, some really intriguing news that I read just a few days ago. So let's start with our movie and TV segment. But before we enter that, let me first say a big thank you to my Patreon community that helps me to do this work. If you want to join them, take a look at patreon.com/Father Roderick.
How do you not like movies?
They're predictable. Like, the guy gets the girl and that kid sees dead people and Darth Vader is Luke's father.
Not liking movies is like not liking puppies.
They're fine. I just get bored and never make it to the end.
You know, you need a movie education. You need a movication. Now I'm gonna give it to you.
All right, let's talk about The Creator by Gareth Edwards. And Garrett Edwards, of course, is a very familiar name for all of you that love Star Wars, because he was the one who gave us Rogue One. And his science fiction movie, The Creator, is now available on Disney+.
When the war started, they protected me. Took better care of me than humans would have.
They're not people, Maya. It's just programming.
10 years ago today, the artificial intelligence created to protect us detonated a nuclear warhead in Los Angeles. This is a fight for our very existence.
Sergeant Taylor, we are this close to winning the war. But the AI are developing a super weapon. Retrieve it, or they win.
Did you locate the weapon?
Yeah, it's just a kid.
Are you going to heaven?
No. You gotta be a good person to go to heaven.
So we're the same. We can't go to heaven because you're not good. And I'm not a person.
Do you have any idea what the thing is?
She looks like a little girl now, but she's growing. Whoever has that kid wins the war.
Whose side do you want, huh?
What do you want, sweetie?
For robots to be free.
Oh, we don't have that in the fridge. How about ice cream?
The Creator. It's now available on Disney Plus, as I said, and I am so impressed by this movie. I was hoping that it would be good because I have great faith in Garrett Edwards. He is absolutely someone who turned the Star Wars world upside down, and I really think that he delivered with this movie. It feels, to a certain extent, very similar to Rogue One. Some of the special effects and the way the story is constructed. There were a lot of moments where I was like, wow, I can tell that this is the same guy who brought us Rogue One. So that alone should be a reason for you to watch it. The second reason is that there is a fantastic story that is being told, and it's all about, you heard a little bit about that in the trailer, about what makes us a person and what makes life worth protecting. And this is, I think, a very topical movie because it talks about the evolution of artificial intelligence and what if artificial intelligence leads to new life forms, and how do we relate to that? Are we still going to be the ones who want to be in charge and feel threatened by anything that may actually be more intelligent than we are? So it's definitely a story that is meant for these times to help us reflect on this. On the other hand, of course, artificial intelligence, the way it is often thought about in our current day and age, is not really self-aware artificial intelligence like what we see in science fiction movies like this or in Star Trek The Next Generation. You may recall this very famous episode of The Next Generation where Data is put on trial, and the central question is Data a person, or is he just a glorified toaster? And it's the same kind of question that was very central in the new Battlestar Galactica also. Are we talking about toasters, the Cylons, or are they actually just like us and maybe to a certain extent even more human than the humans are portrayed in Battlestar Galactica? This movie is about similar themes. That's why I like it so much. The third reason that I love The Creator is that I know that this movie was actually made on a relatively low budget. And a lot of the visual style of it looks incredibly big and impressive, but almost all of that is thanks to what ILM has done after they shot the movie. So a lot of it, or actually everything, is shot on location. There's almost no green screen involved, maybe just some local green screen to help the special effects department. But a lot of the scale of the movie comes from the special effects, and also, I have to say, from the sound design, which is really good, and the score, which is also very epic. And it goes to show that you don't need a massive budget to make a movie that feels big. Remember Back to the Future? If I say Back to the Future, you think of a big box office sci-fi special effects extravaganza. In fact, Back to the Future 1 was a very modest movie in terms of budget. Even in terms of special effects, there are almost no special effects. And what makes it feel so big is the way the story is filmed. The cinematography is very important. So the way the camera moves, they use a lot of crane shots. And the moment you see a crane shot, your mind tells you, oh, this is big budget. But it doesn't have to be. A crane shot is actually quite simple to do. But it's all in the way the camera moves and the sound design of Back to the Future and the score. The audio elements are the things that help you feel about this movie as if it's just this massive thing. And I like that. I think we need to go back to that kind of filmmaking. Just throwing money at a movie production is not going to guarantee a good result. We've seen countless examples of that. And whereas if you are more restricted with your budget, you have to become more creative. And I think that Garrett Edwards is a master in being super creative with a low budget. I think one of his first movies that was his breakthrough movie was about this Godzilla-like monster. I think it was called Monsters, if I'm not mistaken. And that was on a shoestring budget, and yet it also feels very cinematic. It's a great movie. That is what got the attention from Disney and why they invited him to make Rogue One. And so I like that this kind of almost indie type of filmmaking is still producing great results. And I think this could be a solution to the rut that some of these big movie companies are in right now. Is instead of just making the budgets bigger and bigger, try making them smaller and see what happens. In a kind of on a smaller scale, in my own work, it's very similar. I don't have very expensive cinematic cameras. I don't even like the standard that is used right now for documentaries and TV is the Sony A7S III, and almost any documentary maker that I know has that particular camera. But if you buy that camera plus lenses, you're easily that's gonna amount to like 6,000 or 7,000 euros. I don't have that kind of money. So what do? I film with very simple Canon cameras, and right now my main camera is my iPhone, which is a very expensive phone compared to other phones, but is dirt cheap if you compare that to movie grade cameras. But you can absolutely use an iPhone to produce cinematic results. Apple itself has demonstrated that in their own demos. Garrett Edwards actually, because of the constraints on his budget, used this Sony A7S III, and also there is another version of that. It's a little bit more easier to use for movie type of work, but really consumer grade cameras to film almost the entirety of the movie The Creator, and it looks fantastic. It's not just because ILM has been upgrading the image. Actual footage that you see on location was filmed just with these super, super cheap cameras. I think this movie deserves a lot of praise because it does so much with so little. Highly recommended. What else have I seen? A very old TV show. This one aired, I think, in 2005 to 2007. And it's called Rome. It was one of the hit shows on HBO when HBO wasn't a streaming platform, just on cable TV, and a lot of people loved their high quality productions, like The Sopranos. I think that was about the same era. And so Rome was an historical fiction TV series based in ancient Rome, and also part of the story takes place in ancient Egypt. And it has very good writing. It was actually quite groundbreaking at the time because it still had a television budget, and this was still in the early days of television special effects. So a lot of it had to be done practically on location with just a view, wider shots of the city of Rome, for instance, or Alexandria in Egypt. And that's where they used paintings, etc. They couldn't do what they're currently doing with Rings of Power. And yet the series looks really good and feels also very cinematic. Ray Stevenson, the late Ray Stevenson, who plays Balin Skull in the Ahsoka series, has a very important role in this series. He plays Titus Rullo. This is another reason for me to actually finally watch Rome. There is just one thing that is not good about Rome, and it's everything that takes place in ancient Egypt. And I'm not talking about the story, I'm not talking about the acting, but the way they visualized ancient Egypt is completely wrong. It's totally like a romanticized fake video game-like version of Egypt. None of it is correct. From the way they portray Alexandria, the way they portray any inside scene in Egypt, the way the houses look, the way the people dress, the hair, none of it is anywhere close to reality. And I know this because I'm following this historian on TikTok, and she's been doing these videos about the portrayal of ancient history in modern TV shows and movies. And then she explains why it doesn't work. She did that for Napoleon. I think I played even that video a couple of weeks ago. And she did a series about Rome and Egypt in modern day television. And so she comments and she says, I don't understand it, because the people that made the Rome series, they got a lot of the Rome stuff, that was okay. It was about 80% okay. But whenever it moves to Egypt, it is so full of cliches. But all the knowledge, the archaeological knowledge, was already available to the makers at the time. We know what Egyptians looked like. Even the way that they did their hair. We have statues, we have paintings of them. But instead, they went for this wild fantasy version of Egypt where every scene seems to be filmed inside and like a dug-up temple, and it's all like really dark and gloomy. Whereas Alexandria at the time, that was the second biggest city of Egypt, was a bustling city that in many respects was way more impressive than Rome at the time. The Romans stole a lot of the ideas that they got from ancient Alexandria and started to build similar stuff in Rome. We always think of the Romans as having this amazing culture and very rich architectural heritage, but a lot of it was taken from Egypt. Even the mythology of Rome itself was not originally from Rome. They took a lot from Greece. So they were stealing all over the place and just rehashing it and made it into their own Roman version. So I always love to get that kind of knowledge from TikTok, and wow, I would love to have like a full commentary of that historian on each and every episode just to learn from what she tells us. And the funny thing is, even though the Egyptian scenes in the series Rome look like all the cliches you would find in a video game, there is actually, if you really want to experience what Alexandria looked like for real in that era of history, you should play a video game. According to this historian, there is actually a video game that nails the way Alexandria looked. And you can walk around in it, and it is so close to what we know. It's been created on the basis of the advice of a lot of archaeologists and historians. And the game is called Assassin's Creed Origins. And Assassin's Creed Origins takes place in ancient Egypt. But they did a lot of research. This is what the game is also famous for, especially in the later versions of the game. Almost every environment that they choose as a setting for the game has been researched very, very thoroughly. They take pride in that. And even the first game, which takes place in the Middle East and in Jerusalem and some other places, it's not entirely correct. That was still the early days of that video game, but it still does a pretty good job in conveying what a city like Jerusalem looked like in that time, even though the whole, the way the city plan is done is more fantasy than fact. But later on, when, for instance, in the second game, you go to Florence, some of the other games you go to, I think also to Venice. Definitely there's a part of the game, I think it's the third game, that takes place inside the Vatican. And it's pretty convincing, even though it's not entirely correct. So if you've been on location in St. Peter's Basilica and in the museum, you know how these rooms and corridors should interconnect, and then when you're in the game, it's very jarring that you turn a corner and it's like, how can I be on St. Peter's Square? That is really not what... But it still does a very good job in being faithful to the way that the city of Rome looked at the time. And so for a good impression of what Alexandria looked like, check out Assassin's Creed Origins. I don't know. There used to be a free demo, in which there was no game, there was no story, but you could walk around in Alexandria. And there was another one where you could do the same with... in Greece, I think, in Athens, in ancient Athens. And it was just basically giving you the game engine. You could walk around there, but it had the sound effects, it had the entire city. And actually, I before I had the game, that was what I played. I love just walking around and imagining that I was there. And I personally can't wait until I can play games like that in VR inside the Meta Quest or the Apple Vision Pro. I guess I'm putting my money on the Meta Quest because Apple is so protective of its system that I don't think they will allow us to play games like that in VR anytime soon, unless they can get a cut of the money. But I know that for the Meta Quest, they are working on some stuff that you can sideload, and then you can basically step into a game like Origins. You need a very powerful computer. That's the other thing that I don't have. Plus, I don't have a Meta Quest, but it's something that I aspire to do one day. I'd love to go to ancient Rome. When I am in Rome, for real, like in my most recent episodes of The Catholic Insider that I'm currently pre-publishing to my higher tier patrons, I walk around in this big, it's more than a bathhouse. It's the Terme de Caracalla. So it's this entire like system of bathhouses and saunas and whatnot. And you walk around there, and I actually used VR technology that you could rent on location to walk around and to see what it looked like 2,000 years ago. And I remember that with that, because of that experience, I so wanted to do that for the rest of Rome as well. And I know that in some of these games, you could actually do that. And it's already feasible with a little bit of tinkering to do that in VR today. So I'll keep you posted if I ever venture into one of these ancient cities. What else did I watch? Speaking of ancient history, I continue to watch Vinland Saga, which is this anime series based on the history of the Vikings, and that story gets better all the time. It's such a great anime. If you've never watched any anime, you have no interest of watching any anime, but you are interested in history and the history of the Vikings, go watch this. It's on Netflix, so it's available to a lot of people. It's a great story. It's a bit violent, but those were violent times. But the story arc and also the Christian elements in that story are so incredibly well done. I've never seen anything like it in the world of anime. And what I loved about the episode that I watched most recently was, so you see some of these characters are Christian, and they are depicted as losers at first. There's this prince who's called Prince Canute, and he's supposed to be the successor to a very famous Danish king, very powerful and brute king. But the boy is just a wimp. They actually call him a girl because he behaves like a girl. He's got long hair like a girl, and it's like he fulfills all the cliches that people had at the time about women. And it's only in this last episode that I watched where you finally learn why he's behaving like that. And it turns out when he was at the court of his father, he's seen so many atrocities. The only way to stay alive was to duck, was to make sure that no one noticed him, that everybody thought of him as a loser. And then there was no need to kill him. He wasn't a threat. And that has been his secret all the time. But to a certain extent, he's just as traumatized as Thorfinn, who's the other boy in the series, who loathes at first this Prince Canute. It's like, you are such a loser, and I don't want to talk to you. But it turns out that these two actually have very similar backgrounds. They just reacted to it in a different way. Thorfinn is traumatized by the murder of his father, and he reacts with rage and with violence, and by excluding any type of empathy from his life because he wants to avenge his father. And the other boy reacts to the same type of trauma by like folding in onto himself, like hiding and crawling away and making himself as small as possible. So it's the opposite reaction. But these two boys, I think, have more in common than they know and than they think. And ultimately, I think they will team up. That's where I see the story go. And there are some other characters that are very interesting. There's this priest who we've seen in the background at first, and then in this particular episode, he's more in the forefront. He has a conversation with two Vikings about love. And apparently, this is not even shown in the episode. Apparently, he has told them that there is a greater form of love. Love is not just infatuation or whatever, but there are different types of love. And then there's this wonderful conversation between these two brothers. And they try to understand what he's saying. And so they talk about the love that they have as brothers for one another and how that love makes them even want to die on the battlefield if that could save the other. And then they ask the priest, is that the kind of love you talk about? And then he is like, yeah, we're getting there. And it's such a wonderful conversation. So unexpected to see that in an anime series. And then this priest is drinking heavily. And so the two Vikings are asking him, but if you are also full of that love, why do you feel the need for drinking so much? Is that a way to express your love for booze? And then he's like, I'm not drinking because I like booze. There's another reason. And he doesn't say, but there are some hints that he has to do something with the father of Thorfinn. And there is a mystery there too. And then even the bad guy, Askeladd, who's this very vicious Viking, turns out to have a secret past. He is actually not just a Viking. He is half Welsh, and he's got a secret plan to use that to his advantage. And I love this. This episode really took the whole series to another level where all of a sudden you see where the people come from and what the hidden layers are. And this makes you even more invested in the story. So, wow, what an incredible series. I'm so hooked. Anyone who has encouraged me to watch this, they were right. They were totally right that this is absolutely worth my time. All right, one final thing I want to talk about, and that is the world of books.
When did you become an expert in thermonuclear astrophysics?
Last night. The packet. The extraction theory papers. Am I the only one who did the reading?
So I've had to change my reading strategy, and I think I shared this maybe last week with my patrons. But so my original plan was to read only 50 books this year. But I would read the big ones, the Red Rising and the Wheel of Time and some of the bigger Brandon Sanderson novels. And it turns out that strategy completely backfired. I could not focus. Like, I've been trying to get through these bigger books, and I just lose. I lose what's going on. I forget what I'm reading. I can't concentrate. And so I'm thinking that this is part of my ADHD problem, that I cannot, especially if stories, like the big stories of Brandon Sanderson and Red Rising, they're full of characters. Like the novel that I was trying to read was the 4th book in the Red Rising series. And every chapter, it changes perspective. And every time it's people you don't know yet, and there's so many names, and you don't know what's going on. And I got so lost, and it was such an effort to work through that book that I just gave up. I was like, this is not for me. I made a lot of progress reading last year because I could read while I was doing other things. Like when I'm folding laundry or I'm cleaning the house, doing the dishes, even playing some simpler video games, I could listen to an audiobook at the same time. But with these types of big books where you have to keep track of so many different characters, I can only read the book. The only way to get through that book is to sit down and focus on the story. And that's something I can't do because I get distracted all the time. So rather than trying to force myself to stick with the plan, I changed it. I changed my goal back to 100 books. Maybe I'll even up it. And I'm starting to go and read the same kind of books that I read last year because that's what I enjoyed doing, like reading a book in 2 days and then move on to the next one. That keeps me much more motivated to keep reading because there's this reward of finishing a book, and that gives me enough dopamine to start the next book. And so I just need these shorter attention spans. And so I'm back to reading a lot of different books, which actually benefits you, because for the show, I can talk about new books every week, which I can do if I'm reading these long-form books. So this week, I'm reading a book by Jacques Pepin. And I talked about Jacques Pepin before on this show because he is one of my favorite YouTube cooks. Actually, I met him on TikTok. There are a couple of channels that are dedicated to a TV show that he had, or maybe just a YouTube channel, and they're reposting stuff where they reframe it vertically. And so I came across a lot of these, and he's just in his own kitchen, and he's preparing very traditional, simple, run-of-the-mill French food. The stuff that I got when I was staying with my friends in France in the past. When I was a seminarian, I had a lot of friends in France, and so for the summer holiday, I would always go to France and stay there for a couple of weeks in a village, or staying at a rectory, and I would just eat what the people on the countryside ate, and it was exactly that type of food. Even the kitchen looks very much like the ones that I know from my youth, and to have this Jacques Pepin, who is actually a very famous chef and is very well known in the United States, had a great career. He's just teaching you the simple stuff, and it's delicious because he's working with just good ingredients, and simplicity is often, I think, also a remedy to all this overcomplicated cooking that we see on TV. And the other thing that I like about Jacques Pepin is just his character. He's just a very kind of laid back, nice guy, and he likes to cook. Like every video, you feel like, I'm just here in my kitchen. Oh, by the way, welcome. And today we are going to make this, and this is also something that my wife loves very much. So I'm going to show you how to do it. And you feel like you're really there with him in his kitchen. There's nothing fake about the guy. And so I was really excited to discover that he had written a biography called The Apprentice, My Life in the Kitchen. And so I've been reading that book for a day now, and it is wonderful. And it so matches his personality on YouTube. He moved to the United States after working in very famous French kitchens at the time, but he wanted to go to the United States because he's an adventurous guy, and he loved kind of the openness of the American culture. And it also gave him permission to try new recipes. The problem with French cuisine, according to him, is that the French are very possessive about the way in which certain types of food have to be prepared. If you diverge from the norm, you're considered a heretic. Do you see this similar kind of mixture between identity and culinary culture in Italy as well, where in fact a lot of the dishes that we now label as typically Italian were actually imported from other countries, but they were necessary to create a common language, a culinary identity. So because Italy, of course, has not always been a united country. And so the food is extremely important in helping to establish that identity. And this is why especially Italians and French are so allergic to anything that diverges from the norm, like a pizza with pineapple. For an Italian, it's a mortal sin. It's an affront. It's something you don't do. It's like drinking cappuccino after breakfast. It's like one of the worst things. It will certainly end you up in hell if you're not careful. But it is because it's linked to this cultural identity. That is why they are so kind of really attached to these actually very recent traditions. That's totally different, of course, in the United States. It doesn't have that same kind of history. It doesn't feel the need to identify its identity through food. Because let's be honest, American food for a very, very long time was pretty bad in quality. And still is in certain places, but because Americans are much more adventurous when it comes to cooking, Jacques Pepin, when he moved to New York, I think he went to New York. He worked in a number of restaurants where they actually challenged him to come up with some variations, and that actually made him grow as a chef. And so he talks about that. It's a very interesting book. I love the way it is. It's not pretentious at all. some of these chapters have very long descriptions of what he was cooking for his own wedding, for instance, and how he loved to just go outside, catch his own fish, and then prepare it on the riverside and stuff like that. So a lot of the chapters are about him cooking, and then when you read it, you actually really want to join him in the kitchen and make the same thing. But what I like about it is this is cooking without drama. This is all about passion. And a lot of our modern day cooking TV shows are all about the drama. It's not much about cooking, actually. If you look at Hell's Kitchen or anything that features Gordon Ramsay, especially the American shows, it's all about him swearing and getting angry and basically just playing a blown up version of himself. He's not at all like that. It's a personality, but the problem is it I think diminishes or it threatens, I think, the love that people can have for cooking. Cooking is always associated with stress. And look at the series The Bear on I think it's also on Apple TV Plus. It's an amazing television series. But oh my goodness, there is never a single minute in that kitchen where people are just enjoying cooking. It's always war. It's always fighting and rivalries and catastrophes. And there's not a single moment of just like, let's just love to cook. Let's just enjoy the process, which is what makes me love cooking so much. For me, it's a moment to relax, to enjoy. And yeah, things may go wrong, but we'll learn from it and we'll just, oftentimes it's because I overcomplicate things. And if I create simple dishes, like the original, like French or Italian recipes, there's almost never, it always works. So anyway, I love the book, Jacques Pepin, The Apprentice, My Life in the Kitchen. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of The Break. Stay tuned for other shows as well. You may know that I record a weekly episode of The Walk, which is also available wherever you get your podcasts. Just look for The Walk with Father Roderick. And very soon, we're going to launch a new website. And one of the cool things there is that you can subscribe to another. If you're a patron, you get every once in a while you get these stories in your mailbox. But I'm going to create another email newsletter, and it's all about how I do my work, how to communicate your message effectively. And I'm telling stories about my travels all around the world. And one of the things I'm currently working on is I'm going to resurrect the Catholic Insider. And we are kind of reworking all the shows, especially the ones that are recorded on location. And I have to say, I was surprised how well they hold up, even though some of them have been created like more than 10 years ago. But when you listen to them, they still feel as if they're just recorded yesterday. So all that and more coming very soon. So keep following me on social media. And if you're a patron, of course, there's more to come. So stay tuned. God bless, and see you next time.